this place.
Dad, I love you.
Dad, I love you.
That's a copy.
The long gap between Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse feels a lot more understandable once you look at the bigger animation landscape and some of the major sequel plans that were recently revealed. The Spider-Verse movies have become a major pillar in modern superhero storytelling because they changed how animated comic book films can look and feel. Ever since Into the Spider-Verse came out, the series has built a strong reputation for bold visuals, layered storytelling, and emotional character arcs. So when the sequel expanded that world and succeeded again, it raised expectations even higher for the finale. But the wait for Beyond the Spider-Verse has been a sore spot for some fans because the timeline stretched much longer than originally expected. At first, people thought the follow-up would arrive quickly, especially since the second and third films were once planned as two parts of one larger story. Instead, the third movie got pushed far back, which created frustration. Even though that reaction makes sense from an audience point of view, newer industry news helps explain why the delay is actually logical for a project built at this level of detail. The third Spider-Verse movie was first lined up for a March 2024 release, but it eventually moved to June 2027 after a period where no one was even sure when it would arrive. That shift created a 4-year gap between the second and third films instead of roughly 1 year. That sounds huge on paper, but it lines up with how long top-tier animated films often need when they use highly experimental styles and complex rendering techniques. Because these movies are not using standard animation pipelines, every creative choice adds time to production. A useful comparison comes from another major animated hit. K-pop Demon Hunters exploded in popularity after its June 2025 debut, and Netflix later confirmed it became the platform's most-watched movie ever. Because it performed so strongly, a sequel announcement was expected, and that follow-up is now scheduled for 2029. That also creates about a 4-year wait between the first and second films. So when you put that next to the Spider-Verse schedule, the pattern looks less like a delay problem and more like a realistic animation timeline for projects with heavy stylistic ambition. Both franchises lean into very distinctive visual identities, and that choice increases production complexity. Even though animation technology has improved and some steps are faster than before, movies like these still demand frame-by-frame artistic control. The Spider-Verse films mix comic panel effects, layered frame rates, shifting color styles, and alternate universe designs, and each of those elements takes time to build and refine. So while a live-action sequel can sometimes move faster, this kind of animated sequel usually can't, because the art style itself is part of the storytelling engine. There's also the quality factor to consider. Both Spider-Verse films connected with audiences because viewers could see the care in the details, in the motion, the lighting, the character animation, and the emotional beats. That kind of response raises the bar for the next installment. If the studio rushed the finale, it would risk undercutting what made the earlier movie special. So giving the third film several extra years isn't just about logistics, it's about protecting the creative standard that made the franchise popular in the first place. This matters even more because Beyond the Spider-Verse is designed to be the closing chapter in Miles Morales' trilogy arc. It isn't just another episode, it's the payoff. Because the previous film ended on a major cliffhanger with Miles trapped in another universe and facing an alternate version of himself, the ending has to resolve multiple emotional and multiverse-level conflicts. That raises the writing and animation demands at the same time. So the longer production window supports a more complete and polished conclusion. Sony's confirmed release date, June 18, 2027, also makes strategic sense when you look at what else is coming around that period. The second film arrived 5 years after the first, and now the third arrives 4 years after the second, which shows a consistent pattern for how long these entries take to build. Although waiting years to resolve a cliffhanger can test patience, the placement of the new date actually lines up well with the broader superhero movie calendar. One key detail is that Beyond the Spider-Verse will release about 6 months before Avengers: Secret Wars. That timing is important because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is expected to wrap up its multiverse storyline with that Avengers film. If the story direction follows the comic version, it could involve large-scale reality resets and timeline collapses. Because of that, launching the Spider-Verse finale before that event allows Sony to finish its own multiverse saga without being overshadowed by a larger franchise reset happening at the same time. There's also another Spider-Man film arriving before that, Spider-Man Brand New Day, which is scheduled for mid-2026 and is expected to be the final MCU film before another Avengers-level turning point. If those movies move the shared universe toward a reboot structure, then releasing Beyond the Spider-Verse in 2027 lets Sony close out the Miles Morales animated storyline right before that wider shift happens. That positioning gives the film breathing room and narrative independence. From a brand perspective, that order helps Sony as well. The studio has slowed or paused a bunch of its other Spider-Man-related spin-off projects, so ending the Spider-Verse trilogy before a possible multiverse-wide reset could give them flexibility. It leaves the door open for future reboots or new directions without leaving the animated storyline hanging. Because the Spider-Verse movies operate in their own creative lane, they benefit from ending cleanly rather than overlapping with a giant crossover reset. There's also audience fatigue to consider. Since Avengers Endgame, the MCU has focused heavily on multiverse storytelling, and although some fans enjoy it, the overall reaction hasn't been as strong as the earlier saga phases. That softer response has affected excitement levels around some Marvel releases, but the Spider-Verse films are often pointed to as the most successful multiverse stories in terms of creativity and emotional payoff. So letting them conclude before the MCU closes its multiverse arc allows them to stand out instead of blending into the noise. Releasing the film after Secret Wars could make it feel like leftover multiverse content, even if the quality is high. But arriving before that event turns it into a kind of finale moment for multiverse storytelling done right. It becomes a high-note ending instead of an afterthought. Because timing shapes perception, that scheduling choice supports the movie's impact. When you combine all these factors, the technical demands of the animation, the comparison to other major animated sequels with similar gaps, the need to stick the landing on a trilogy ending, and the strategic release timing near major Marvel events, the 4-year wait looks more justified. Keep your eyes right here, because if you truly love cinema, this is the channel you need to be watching.